So, You Hurt My Feelings is a comedy, light comedy with a little bit of drama added in, about a married couple who face a tough time with being honest with each other. And and it's not like it's not a huge deal where it feels like this is a situation that's going to ruin this marriage, where it feels like they're going to be on like the brink of divorce by the end of the picture. It's nothing that serious. It feels like it almost feels like this is a more relatable situation for like a married couple who is not on the rocks, but like has some issues here and there with their relationship. And it's mostly because this film treats its married couple as two people who genuinely love each other. It's still there. They still have passion. But they have problems with just being more open and being honest with themselves. Not like huge problems where it's just like they have like this festering this rage and pain within them that they got to deal with, but just kind of like they need to be nudged a little bit into like being better people. So the married couple is Beth and Don, played by Julia Louis-Dreyfus and Tobias Menzies, and they both have problems with honesty within their careers as well, because like they've kind of fallen into this point in their life where they still love each other, but their careers have kind of stagnated and they've kind of lost a little bit of their passion. So Beth is an author who is kind of struggling to sell her latest manuscript because she's dabbling into a new area and she's been working on it for 2 years and can't convince any publisher to go with her. And at the same time, she's struggling for relevancy because she's seeing other authors more successful than her that are rising up through the ranks. Don is a therapist who is kind of losing his way. He's struggling to try to give advice and is not doing a very good job. He's unsure how to help people, and he's kind of holding back his feelings about situations that could really use some blunt honesty. Like the film opens with him trying to help a married couple played by Amber Tamblyn and David Cross, who are just like a comically over the top like dysfunctional marriage that is not working. There's never a moment where you think that Beth and Don are going to get a divorce, but you just know that like that Jonathan and Carolyn are probably going to get a divorce at some point. They're just absurd, and they're probably like the funniest part of the film. So Beth and Don are kind of like struggling with their feelings. They celebrate an anniversary where they kind of like grin and bear the same gifts that they've got for every anniversary. Like Beth gets some earrings with a design that she's had many, many times. Don gets a V-neck t-shirt. I believe it's like I don't know if it's a t-shirt, but it's a V-neck, and he's kind of like, okay, you know, it's V-neck. I don't like wearing them, but you know, I'll go with it because, you know, it's our anniversary. I'm being nice here. So this film is all about, you know, just people struggling to be nice and trying to find a way to be more open, because the inciting incident here is that Beth tries to surprise Don one day by sneaking up on him in a store because she finds him out and about one day, and then she overhears Don talking to his friend Mark, played by Aria Moyad, I believe is pronouncing it correctly. Don basically says that he didn't really like Beth's manuscript. Like he said, like, you know, yes, I'm here for you. I'm going to support you, but it's like, yeah, you'll sell this thing. But in, you know, private, Don says like, I don't really like her manuscript. I don't know if it's going to do that well. And so Beth, overhearing this, is like immediately crestfallen. She believes that she was under the belief that, you know, Don was brutally open with her this entire time, and just it feels like she's been lied to. And of course, this feels like a situation that it could be resolved with just like, you know, one good sit down and talk this out. And indeed, that's eventually where all this is leading to. It's just like these two characters need to sit down, be a little bit open, and they'll be fine. Like, you know, this is just like a minor hurdle that one discussion could solve. But the discussion gets put off because Beth doesn't really want to confess here because she has the same problem as Don. Don doesn't want to hurt Beth's feelings, and Beth doesn't want to feel like she's snooping and needs to know everything about Don at every time. And the thing is, like, because Don actually does care for her. Like, it's not one of those things where he's just, like, outright lying to her. It's a thing that Don cares for Beth to a degree that, you know, he wants to, you know, support her and make her feel good. Because at one point, like, early on, Beth kind of confronts Don and says, like, do you like my manuscript? And Don's kind of like, well, do you like your manuscript? Because that's actually kind of the more important thing here. You know, if you're going to do writing, you know, like, you want to make sure it's something that you want to write and it's something that you want to have passion for. Because even if you don't, like, become successful and you don't make a living at it, you still want to do it because you like it. And that's ultimately what the film is leading up towards, is that you've got to be honest and you've got to find some love in what you do. Because, like, eventually, Don does bounce back when he's more open. Beth does bounce back when she starts working better with publishers. And my biggest problem with this film is just that, like, because, like, the issue isn't that dire and the stakes are very, very low for this type of comedy, the characters are treated so precious, where it's like they're so delicate, where you feel like, you know, like the slightest big conflict could, like, set them off. And indeed, like, you kind of see that happen with Beth and Don's son, Elliot, played by Owen Teague, who kind of, like, is like the kind of like the audience surrogate here. He gives, like, the blunt information to his parents, like, you know, that, you know, like, look, guys, you know, you've been supportive, but being supportive isn't, like, the same as, you know, giving love. You know, like, there's such a thing as, you know, toxic positivity that you're kind of, like, giving off here, and you kind of got to knock it off. It's like Elliot's probably the most relatable character here because he's much more blunt, but at the same time doesn't really want to hurt anyone's feelings. He just wants to live his own life, and he just wants, you know, characters to be more honest and open with themselves, which is the perfect balance for Beth and Don. Like, he's, you know, it would feel like he'd be a third wheel in this, but he's definitely not. He's definitely, like, the grounding element of this married couple. In addition to that, you know, the other characters that get to talk to, like, they also have their own problems. Like, Sarah, who is Beth's sister, played by Michaela, I believe I'm saying it right, Michaela Watkins, who, you know, she's a interior designer who is bitter about her job as well. She's married to Mark, who is Don's friend as well. He's an actor who's struggling as well, and he hates his job and feels like, you know, there's no out for him. And the thing is, like Mark and Sarah are in, like, a very interesting spot because they're at a point where they almost feel like they want to give up their jobs. Like, they've lost their spark and they don't feel like it can work anymore. And it kind of becomes, like, an interesting parallel for how almost, like, Don and Beth feel like they can't make their relationship work anymore. So it's like Don and Beth are working on their relationship with their career on the side, and Sarah and Mark are working on their careers at the same time. And they both kind of have a little bit of overlap as the characters connect with each other. And there's some decent dialogue in there, but like, my biggest problem with the film, and the reason that it didn't work for me, because I know this film worked for a lot of people. When this film hit festivals, there were a lot of people like, oh, it's a charming, very, very adorable film, I guess is the best way to say it. But the thing is, like, I found it just, like, a little bit too saccharine with, like, the way that it's framing its characters, because it feels like there's a lot of, like, setups for punchlines with making these characters, like, a little bit more satirical with the material. Like, because, like, one of the jokes with Beth is that she writes her memoirs, and part of, like, her legacy is that she stages herself as, like, an abuse victim, but from verbal abuse. And from verbal abuse, I mean specifically just being told that she's stupid, which I feel like the film, like wanted to make it like a punchline to be like, look how, because like at one point Beth does bring out like, I wish I had more abuse in my life so that my story was more interesting. And it feels like, that's satirical of like, people who were, you know, people who want attention and feel like, they need more tragedy in their life because like tragedy will be more artistically fulfilling. But they don't really pay it off very much. And this feels like it happens again because at one point, like Beth tries to put like her problems in perspective by saying this is not that big of a deal because like climate change is happening and like the world's kind of ending. So what are my problems? But it's kind of brought up more like just kind of like a passive punchline where it's just like our marriage is in shambles, but like oh well okay there's climate change. I got to realize there's other problems in the world. There's other problems besides me, and there's a little bit of like a frustrating element to this where it almost feels like it's a Curb Your Enthusiasm episode where like someone who doesn't like cringe humor went in and kind of like wrote out all like the funny parts where like the characters get their comeuppance and ridiculous things happen to them and like they get embarrassed and karma comes back to bite them in the ass, and that doesn't happen in You Hurt My Feelings, just because like I feel like it's trying so hard to make you care about these characters and find them precious, to the point where at one point like Elliot runs a hemp shop, and at one point it's robbed while Beth is there, and of course when that happens Beth just kind of like tries to protect her son by just like smothering him. She just gets on top of him, just like corners him, and like the robber's like, get the money. It's like, Mom, I gotta get the money or the robber's gonna shoot us. Can you get off me for a little bit? And it's like there's a little bit of dark humor in there. There's several moments in here where I kind of like smirked like that. Like I said, you have David Cross here and Amber Tamblyn playing off each other. They do a great job. You have a few other characters who kind of like make their mark here. Zach Cherry, who you might know, he has like kind of like a small role in like a few other like superhero films. He plays like kind of like this great therapist patient who you can tell like he hates his therapist and doesn't let that like right before he cuts off a call, he's like, God damn, this guy's an ass. I can't stand this. And like you can tell he's holding back like this frustration with the therapist. So there's like some decent dry humor here and there, but I don't know, maybe it's because like I viewed the film more on like kind of like a Curb Your Enthusiasm, where it's just like I was waiting for like a little bit more of the satire to kick in, and it doesn't really. Even when you have like the additional element of Jeannie Berlin playing Beth's mother, who has some quirky scenes. I kind of liked her scenes. It feels like a lot of these scenes are just kind of like playing off like the improv and just hoping that some comedy will come through while trying to make very relatable scenes, because that's the best praise of the film I can give, is that it's got a lot of scenes that feel real and relatable, and the characters feel very it feels like people like this. So in terms of like setting up that atmosphere, I feel like it works, but in terms of being a comedy, it's very, very dry, and I feel like the dryness just makes it a lot more crusty, with the fact that the characters are treated as so fragile and precious that it doesn't want to knock them over that much. And just like it feels like, okay, here's a scene where there might be a little bit of a fight. Okay, prop them back up. Okay, here's a scene where a character might overreact and they might say something funny. No, hang on, pull them back. Don't remind them of climate change, or remind them of like their place their ego in check, because like these are it's frustrating, because this is like the film for like that person who like they can't stand cringe comedy, and they hope that like the characters won't make mistakes, and just like, oh, why would they do that? They shouldn't have done that. And here's a film where they don't do that. Like they're set up with scenarios where they could stumble and ridiculous things could happen, and they could squabble and have some funny banter, and then they're pulled back from the brink. So I guess like, and I can understand why some people like this film, because like the characters are likable enough, but in terms of I feel like it works better as a drama than it does a comedy. And because like it feels like a lot of times they're trying for comedy, it mostly kind of falls flat by trying to maintain your love for all the characters on screen. And for some people, that's going to work, but for me, it kind of annoyed me a bit, where the most I got out of this film was just like a few smirks, a little tiny chuckle here and there, and just a decent level of relatability to these characters.